In a bustling small town, I led a monotonous life, leaving home early each morning and returning late at night. One evening after work, I prepared to take a hot shower as usual, but just as I closed the bathroom door, I thought I heard faint footsteps outside. My heart tightened, and I quickly opened the door, only to find an empty hallway. Although it felt a bit unsettling, I convinced myself it was just fatigue from long hours of work. A few days later, I was awakened in the middle of the night by an inexplicable sound, like someone lightly tapping the walls downstairs. My heart raced as I sat up in bed, creeping to the bedroom door and carefully peeking out. The hallway was pitch black and eerily silent. Taking a deep breath, I slowly descended the stairs, feeling a chill rise from my feet. When I reached the living room, I had the distinct feeling that a pair of eyes were watching me from the shadows. I looked around but saw nothing. The fear began to spread inside me, so I immediately turned on all the lights. But the house remained as it was, with no signs of anything unusual. Over the next few days, the strange nighttime sounds became more frequent, making it impossible for me to sleep. One late night, I was again awakened by an odd sensation this time. I distinctly felt something lurking just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath and listened closely, detecting what sounded like low, heavy breathing on the other side. Terrified, I remained motionless until the sound slowly faded away. The next day, I called a friend to help me inspect the house. Though we found nothing unusual, my fear lingered. I began to wonder if someone had indeed been watching me during the hours I was away each day. Finally, I decided to move out of the house. While there was no concrete evidence that anything was wrong, those strange experiences had made it impossible for me to feel at ease. Even after moving away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if those eyes hidden in the shadows were still observing me. This story taught me that sometimes the scariest things aren't what we can see, but the unknown that we can't quite grasp. It was a harsh winter when I moved into a small cabin in the mountains of Colorado. The cabin was nestled deep in a pine forest, surrounded by nothing but snow-covered peaks and silent woods. This area was far from civilization, especially desolate in winter. The only sounds were the occasional gusts of wind sweeping through the pine trees. That evening, snow began to fall, gradually covering the mountain trails. The sky darkened, and the temperature dropped rapidly. I was by the fireplace, sipping a cup of hot cocoa, lost in a thriller novel, and enjoying the peaceful solitude. The crackling of the wood in the fire added to the cozy atmosphere of the room. Suddenly, I heard a few heavy knocks on the door, faint and intermittent, blending eerily with the wind and snow outside. I put down my book and walked to the door, feeling a sense of unease creeping in. I opened the door to find a man standing outside, dressed in a thick ski suit. Snow clung to him, and his face was blue with cold as if he had been out in the elements for too long. He removed his goggles, revealing tired eyes, and appeared to be around 40 years old. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though there was an undercurrent of wariness. He told me he had gotten lost on a nearby mountain trail. He had planned to go skiing, but a sudden snowstorm hit, and nightfall had come quickly, leaving him unable to find his way back to the resort. His phone had died, and he had no way to call for help, so he had come to seek shelter. I glanced at the endless expanse of snow behind him and realized that getting lost in such weather could indeed be fatal. Despite his seemingly desperate situation, I couldn't shake the feeling of doubt in my mind. I offered to call for help or drive him to a nearby resort, but he insisted that the roads were too dangerous and that he would prefer to stay the night here. There was something off about the way he surveyed my cabin, his eyes calculating as if he was sizing it up. Even though his story was plausible, I politely refused his request, explaining that I was alone and couldn't take in strangers. He seemed disappointed and slightly annoyed, but eventually, He turned and walked away, disappearing into the wind and snow. Time passed slowly, and the snow continued to fall heavily. The unease in my heart never left. As the night deepened, I sat by the fireplace, feeling a growing tension. The wind howled louder outside, like an invisible force creeping closer in the darkness. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise coming from the back of the cabin, like something scraping against the wood. Then, a series of dull thuds, as if someone was forcefully striking the window frame. My heart pounded as I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously approached the kitchen window. Peeking through a crack in the curtain, I saw the same man from earlier, now holding a shovel, trying to pry the window open, his expression cold and determined. A chill ran down my spine as I realized his true intentions. His earlier plea for help had been nothing more than a ruse. I quickly grabbed the fire poker hanging by the fireplace and quietly retreated to the door. As he finally managed to pry the window open and began to climb inside, I suddenly rushed forward and struck his shoulder with the poker. He let out a cry of pain, falling back into the snow, clutching his injured shoulder. He hadn't expected such a response and stumbled away in panic, disappearing into the dark woods. I watched as his figure faded into the snowstorm, my heart still racing. His footprints and streaks of blood were stark against the white snow. By the time the police arrived, dawn was breaking. They found his abandoned backpack in a nearby ravine, filled with lock-picking tools, key gear, and some handwritten notes detailing the locations of houses in the area. That night left a lasting scar on my mind. Even though the police assured me he wouldn't return, I've remained on edge ever since. Now, whenever a snowstorm hits, I listen carefully to the wind, always alert to the possibility of another stranger knocking on my cabin door. At 25, I decided it was time to leave my parents' house and live independently. Despite my modest income, I was determined to find a place of my own. After weeks of searching, I found an ad on a rental website for a beautifully furnished apartment in the city center with a surprisingly low rent. The landlord, Mr. James, even provided furniture. I contacted Mr. James, a middle-aged man who quickly responded and invited me to view the apartment the same day. Eagerly, I accepted and headed to the apartment. Upon arrival, I was struck by the apartment's immaculate decor and cleanliness. Every detail was perfect, like a show home. Mr. James seemed friendly, though he talked a lot, which I didn't mind. After signing the lease, I quickly moved into my dream apartment. However, within a few days, I noticed subtle changes. Furniture mysteriously shifted positions, and the paintings on the walls changed direction. I rarely saw Mr. James. When I did, it was usually late at night, and he always appeared disheveled and pale. One night, I was awakened by noises downstairs and saw Mr. James hurriedly moving boxes, looking anxious. My curiosity led me to investigate Mr. James's background, only to find that his identity was untraceable and the lease information seemed fake. One night, I was startled by urgent knocking at my door. Opening it, I found a nervous stranger who claimed to be an old friend of Mr. James. He warned me to leave the apartment immediately, revealing that Mr. James was not the landlord, but a fugitive using the apartment for illegal activities. Shocked and scared, I decided to verify this myself. While Mr. James was out, I sneaked into his room and discovered large amounts of cash and illegal items, confirming the stranger's warning. Determined to call the police, I was interrupted when Mr. James returned suddenly. Hearing heavy dragging noises downstairs, I remembered the stranger's warning. My heart raced as I quietly hid in my room, waiting for the noises to stop. Then, I slipped out of the apartment and drove away, calling the cops. By the time the police arrived, Mr. James had vanished, and the apartment was spotless. The police informed me that Mr. James's true identity was under investigation, but I had escaped a dangerous situation. After this harrowing experience, I became more cautious about renting. Although the ordeal had frightened me, it also taught me valuable lessons about self-protection. Eventually, I found a safe and comfortable place to live, starting a new chapter in my life.